Hey, it's Larry. Welcome to Stewarding the Wealth Transfer. Well, I've had an interesting 3 weeks. I'm going to tell you about that at the end. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in our country and really the status of the wealth transfer and why I'm as optimistic as ever that things are moving in the right direction. I, like you, wish it would move faster, but it's really interesting how Donald Trump is talking about how the economy of America is different than Wall Street. And I've not heard a president make that distinction before, but I think he's very concerned about the economy and he wants to drill, baby, drill and do all kinds of things that are going to help America's economy. But I don't think he's going to be protective of Wall Street. And then I think his name is Scott Bassett. He said a very interesting thing. I don't know if you saw this. He said, where we're headed is going to be very good for Main Street. Wall Street, he said, has been pretty rough on Main Street, but the direction of America going forward under this administration and for coming years is going to be targeting Main Street. Main Street will be very happy with what we do. So that's really interesting when you've got the head of the Treasury basically saying, you know what, we're going to let Wall Street end up where it ends up. And if you see the prophetic perspective that Julie Green and Amanda Grace and different people, Robin Bullock, they talk about how God is dissatisfied. And I really think that we have a very manipulated system. And it's hard to watch what the current professionals or the industry insiders who really do know what's going on in the markets are saying, because sometimes they're really critical of Trump, but I think that they think in a different way than I do, because as somebody who's a student of the prophetic, and I think you must be if you can, tune into this station when I do talk, and there's a lot of other places where you get your information, but the prophetic is an important perspective and it helps us think outside of the box. And I have a different perspective because I hear what the prophetic is saying, and I believe that there's going to be a different system. I think Wall Street is going to crash way harder than what most people want to admit. And these pundits who sit here behind a microphone and talk like they know what they're talking about, they think that Trump is going to deal with the debt in a way that they expect. And they think that he's going to preserve the Federal Reserve System. I don't think he is. I don't think the taxes are going to stay the same. I don't think the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell's job is secure. I don't understand it. We don't have clarity on that. But I think there's going to be extremely tumultuous times. And I think those who are prepared and listen to the prophetic are going to be very well placed to execute amazing things going forward. And so that kind of brings up the Bend Bootcamp. Everybody wants to know, what am I going to do to get the money? What am I going to do to get the money? And after being a student of wealth for I'm going on my 4th decade, the money is going to come, but what you do with it is what matters more than how you get it. Because I think almost everybody who's in the wealth transfer is going to do remarkably well. I mean, there's people who are on the side and they're not engaged at all. I think they'll have some regrets. But those of you who are leaning in and preparing, but there's questions that you may not be asking, is like, do you think you should pass this on to the next generation? I mean, why are Western Christianity adherents so unbiblical in wanting to pass wealth on to the next generation? Our American culture has taken over the church, and we want to spend it, and we don't really care about passing it on. I mean, that's one question. What about, how do you live? How much of your money do you spend? How do you give? What is your destiny? What is God calling you to do? What kind of influence does God want you to have? And are you called to just support the church, or is God calling you to make a difference in the community? What's so interesting, that's actually kind of summarizes it. So many churches, if they were pulled off or fell off the earth, they really don't make a big difference in communities. Yet I believe the kingdom of God is to be of great impact on the world. And I think that God is blessing you with affluence so that you can have more influence. And that's, some of the stuff we're going to talk about at Bend Bootcamp. And I think that there's a need to get together more often coming up. And so I'm really, trying to wrestle with what do I do and what do I offer. And, I have the luxury of not needing to make a living at doing this, but I think that the value is going to be tremendous. And the first one is going to be a little messy, but there's a lot of people coming to contribute. And so I am super excited about what's going to happen. We have another week that you could still sign up. The 23rd would be the last day. It's going to be jam-packed, but we're still going to have enough time and a flexible schedule that I don't think it's going to be overwhelming. It's not going to be just a talking head. We're going to be in groups a lot. We're going to be presented with challenges, and what do you do? How big of a house do you justify buying or building? What about fancy luxuries? Is it okay for Christians to have a fancy sports car or a nice boat? And why would that be a good thing to do, and why and when would it be something to avoid? Those are questions. What about how do you give? Do you give it all through the church, or how do you learn about great things to support and give? And what kind of projects do you want to be involved in, and what difference are you called to make? So those are some of the things. And so I'd really encourage you to come, and it's really coming together really great. And I hope that you can meet us in Bend. If you do that, you're probably going to fly into Portland, and you can drive down the beautiful Columbia River Gorge and get to Bend. It's about, I think, a 3.5 hour, might be 4 hour drive from the Portland airport to Bend. But it's just a beautiful place, and we can have high 70s weather. Maybe it'll only be in the 60s. It generally doesn't rain over there. Lauren and I have been talking once a week about planning, and she's kicked in a lot of information. We've got a lot of other advisors and even speakers. And so I'm really excited about it, and I hope that you can, possibly come still. Or if you can't make this one, I hope that you'll come at others, because we're going to do a lot of evaluation and learn what the needs are, and then we're going to offer, further events as 2025 rolls out. I think it'll be way easier for most people to attend after the wealth transfer is fully engaged, but for those of you who can come now, I'm really excited. We're going to have a great time. I didn't have the best 3 weeks, and so now it's kind of a sad thing. I thought I'd save it for the end, but it's really important. And here's what my last 3 weeks have been like. 3 weeks ago, my mom went into the hospital. I was actually speaking at a county commissioner meeting, and I got a text, and she said, I've been told to go to the hospital, and I wasn't overly concerned, but I was a little bit concerned. And it ended up that she had internal bleeding, and it looked really serious. And I spent the time with her, and I began to believe that she probably maybe had colon cancer and was, going to pass because she was losing so much blood. God kind of helped her get through that, and she was approaching 91, and she dealt with that issue, and it was great because she had a CAT scan after a couple days, and there wasn't any developed cancer. She had kind of pre-cancer. She didn't really want it, to go through chemo or anything, but it wasn't to that point anyway. But then she started having water on her heart, and her lungs weren't working so good. And so it took a couple days to do that, but she was still bleeding a little bit, and so they took her blood thinners away. And I was like, why did she have a blood thinner? And they said, well, it's to prevent a stroke. And then she had a stroke, and then it turned quite bad, and so she got moved to Portland to a different hospital. And so every day I'm visiting her, and I was only a mile away from the Longview Hospital, so many days I would go over there twice a day. It wasn't hard to do. When she moved to Portland, it was a lot harder. It's an hour and change drive, and bad traffic, and it was really not what you want to see your mom endure. She went from being quite um, mentally acute and, well, clear thinking, well spoken, to after the stroke, half of her body was paralyzed. She didn't talk clearly. It was very interesting. She could still recall things, but she didn't have any new original thought, is kind of how I would describe her cognitively. She really began to deteriorate like shockingly fast. My brother came up and he came up, flew in, stayed with her in the room for 3 days. I didn't know you could stay in a hospital room, but he did, and he fed her a lot of ice, and she really perked up with him around, and I think having the water, but she still couldn't swallow, and so he and I worked, and we got them to finally insert a feeding tube, and we began to be quite optimistic because she really improved a lot, but then she began to go downhill, and we both came to the conclusion that she wasn't going to go to rehabilitation. She was going to head to hospice. And so um, I, I got to cry a lot in the last 3 weeks. And you learn things. And I learned a little bit about how I want to live my last few decades. I think my mom did really well. What a great example of a godly woman. And, I think my brother and I served her well. Sometimes I felt bad for her that she didn't have a daughter. And, I thought sometimes she got the short straw, but we really rallied and spent a lot of time with her. And time again, she said, "You guys are great sons." She said many times I heard her say, "Larry, you're a great son." And it reminded me of that verse when it's what we want to hear when we go to heaven. Well done, good and faithful servant. I felt like I heard it. I didn't hear it from God. I heard it from my mom. Well done. You're a good son, is essentially, and that's how we want to live. And I'm really happy with what my brother did and how we tag teamed it together. And, it was really good. I didn't know it was going to be her last day, but I was in there last week, and a nurse came in. It was in the morning. I'd spent the night. I came in the next day and was going to have a meeting with the doctors, and the nurse goes, "Nancy, do you know what day it is?" And my mom goes, "No." And she said what day of April it was, and my mom rolled over and looked at me and said, "Isn't that your birthday? Isn't this your birthday, Larry?" And yeah, that kind of made me cry that she really did have some complex thoughts. It was odd. She recalled that very clearly. And I fell asleep that night. I actually got up and prayed, and I felt like I was supposed to come here into my office, and I really enjoy sleeping in my chair. And I got a call at 11:40, and my mom had just passed. God, in His kindness, blessed us with our third grandchild, our first granddaughter, just 2 days later. And so it's kind of the circle of life. And, it's rough burying your mom.